Okay, today's guest needs no introduction. I'm talking with David Icke. I think every single person here knows who David Icke is. And he has a new book out right now, Everything You Need to Know But Have Not Been Told or Were Not Told, right? And so today's conversation is going to be a little bit on the challenging side for a lot of people because there are those among you who have actually had direct experience with some of the topics we're talking about. And we're first going to set it up by saying hello to David, whom I have not been on screen with in a few years, and I'm so happy to be with again. Hi, David.
Hello, Regina. Been a long time.
It's been a long time. I'm loving the fact that your work is now going so much more mainstream, really. I mean, we think of you as the grandfather of conspiracy, but now we're learning that conspiracy is not a word that we should have been playing with all along, right?
Right, yeah. Well, more like the uncle. The grandfather bit's to come.
Okay.
Although I am 66 very shortly, but it's just a number. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the interesting things that's happened, and it's happening quicker and quicker, that which was dismissed as conspiracy theory, and let's not forget that term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist was brought into widespread use in the 1960s by the CIA, and the documents exist to prove this. And they contacted major media organizations, urging them to use these terms to discredit those that were understandably questioning the official story of the Kennedy assassination and the assassination of Malcolm X, etc. So it's been a term of derision. And it's interesting that people don't ask the question, well, it's a conspiracy theory. Yeah, hold on, deep breath. But is it true? Do the facts stack up? They never go to that stage. But what's happening now is reality. Life is stacking it up for them. I mean, we've got a very topical situation at the moment. I've been writing for years that these major internet giants like Google owned YouTube, Facebook, etc., were the creations of the American intelligence community and of organizations like DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, an organization so sinister it makes Monsanto look like a Sunday school afternoon. And now, because of the revelations of current times, we're seeing the scale of data mining and surveillance that is being compiled by Facebook, and B, how lackadaisical it is with protecting it. Now, if organizations in the private sector, if you like, can access this Facebook information in terms of billions of people, billions of profiles, and be able to use it for political manipulative reasons, are we really so naive as to believe that the CIA, the National Security Agency, the Pentagon, and so on, is not using the same stuff? And so these things, they tend to, I find, get people to go, well, hold on a minute. Maybe there's something in this. Maybe when Facebook is doing face recognition in its system, maybe it's not to give you a better experience. Maybe, actually, it's to get even deeper into your life on behalf of some very sinister people. Yeah. And, you know, the point being, with these internet giants, and we're talking about Google, of course, who can manipulate through algorithms the search engine results to emphasize some information and suppress others. We've got YouTube now that is blatantly canceling and deleting channels that have gone on for years with lots of followers of people who are in various ways challenging the official narrative. And so what you have, and this is not in any way an exaggeration, you have in Silicon Valley, on behalf of these other sinister organizations in the background, the greatest concentration of surveillance and censorship power in known human history. That's what we're looking at. And it's something that is getting more and more people, just this area, to think, hold on a minute, what is going on? Well, what's going on? That's just a smear of what's going on, but it does give you an insight into it.
It does. And David, there's something else that has to do with the another Google relationship that is incredibly invasive, and talk about gathering useful data. And that is, a lot of people don't know that the original two Google founders, I think it was Sergey and Larry, both married at roughly the same time, the two women that started 23andMe, which of course they funded, which of course 23andMe is gathering with our permission. We pay them to gather our genetic data, which can be used in any way they want. We're talking about a massive ability here to use it in a corrupt fashion. And we're going to be talking about DNA in a little bit, so maybe you can just kind of jump in on this one. Well,
I mentioned that connection in the new book, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. And there's another connection. The sister of the person at that DNA database organization runs YouTube, which is deleting all these channels.
Yes.
Of those that don't want any alternative to the official narrative. And one of the things that I show in the book very clearly is that when you break it down to the nub and the core of who is calling the shots, who is calling the shots in the public arena, the shadows are really calling the shots, you're looking at an incredibly small number of people. You could easily get them on two hands of fingers, who are running Google, who are running YouTube, who are running Facebook, who are running the DNA database company. And then you add the CEO of Apple, who is also connected to these people. It's an incredibly small number of people that are dictating the information that people receive or don't receive, and are compiling this surveillance data in great detail over 7.5 billion people, potentially, but certainly in Facebook's case, 2.2 billion that they claim as active members. So, you know, the ratio of the few to the many is incredible. And going back to what you said earlier about, you know, how the conspiracy theory is now, you know, in our face as fact, I've been saying now for nearly 30 years, a very, very few people control global events and the direction of the world. And people were saying for so long through that 30 years, that's crazy, that's impossible. Well, actually, excuse me, it isn't. Look what's happening. And technology is allowing this number to get even smaller, because he or she that controls the algorithms controls the output and the outcome. You also have to look at this whole artificial intelligence agenda, which is basically in many ways, indeed more than many ways, the end game of all this, controlling the human mind via artificial intelligence, so that eventually, and not too far in the future, according to their timescale, artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. And look at some of the companies that are at the forefront of that AI agenda. Google,
right.
Facebook. I mean, look at it. It's obvious. And what has happened is that these companies have been allowed, encouraged, massively funded. I mean, just as a quick aside, when you watch how these various Silicon Valley, what I call the devil's playground companies emerge, whether it's Uber, whether it's Airbnb or Google or Facebook, they actually emerge with enormous funding at a time when there is no prospect of a profit and a return on that funding. It's like money is no object. And what that money does is allow the development, the expansion, the monopoly situation. And once you get the near monopoly, which Facebook and Google has, then it's no more, you know, hey man, Mr. T-shirt, Zuckerberg, hey man, I'm one of you, cool. What you then do is you start changing the rules, because you can now dictate, because you have this monopolistic or near monopolistic situation where you can decide what people see and what people don't see. And people have, of course, been pulled in and fallen for it. And the events of this week have been an absolute wake-up call for anyone with half a brain cell on active duty about the scale of what is happening out of Silicon Valley.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, you know, another, what I'd like to do with you is go into the intelligence that's behind all this, okay? Because, you know, you were the laughing stock of England, and when you started out, as we've mentioned many times in the past, you would speak to, I think your first talk, you spoke to what, 3 people? You had 3 people in a room, and now
I've done major events in people's front rooms, Regina.
Exactly. And now you arrive in certain countries in the world, and the mainstream media comes out to greet you because what you have had to say over time has borne out to be true. And it was really based on your understanding that there is a corruption, there's a corrupt type of intelligence at the core that is able to infiltrate into and essentially use and control the people that we consider those at the top, the influencers, the elite. And so we're speaking of Archons, and I thought we would go ahead and dive into this part of the story. Now we have so much to cover about the nature of what Archons are, because it's a name that's loosely talked about and tossed about as well. And most people have no idea. And then we'll progress that into, what does an Archon have to do with what you have spoken of as reptilians, for example. And I want to start this story for a reason at where you do in the book, at the original kind of flaw in the program, and discuss that for a moment, because there was an intelligence that was perpetuated in a flawed state.
Well, I as I've researched over the years, over the decades, have looked for patterns and looked for common themes, because my perspective has been that if something is happening now, it's been happening a long time, because world events have not suddenly emerged in terms of this manipulation. This has been a very clear and a very long journey, well, in our perspective of time anyway, of the constant and incessant centralization of power, for instance, into fewer and fewer hands. So you start with a tribal situation where small tribes are deciding how they live their lives. The tribes were then brought together, lots of them, into what we call nations. Now a few people are dominating all the former tribes from the center of the nation. And then you have, as we have in Europe particularly, you have the nations brought together. So now a few people are dictating to all the nations. And that process has now reached the point that we've just discussed, where a handful of people in Silicon Valley have such incredible dominance over the population, the global population as a whole. You also look at the fact that through this period of what we call time, this timeline, people have come in and they've gone out. They've been born and they've died. They've been born and they've died, playing a part in pushing the world in this direction when there was no prospect that the outcome would happen in their lifetimes.
Right.
So you've got people coming in and out, people coming in and out, here today, gone tomorrow, people. Now, it occurred to me a long time ago, there has to be a common force, a common thread that links all this, that is always there. And as I traveled around the world and I talked to shamans and other people from ancient cultures. I've read their accounts. I've read the accounts of others of different cultures and their beliefs and what they talk about in terms of the history of the world and their culture. I've talked to endless people who are connected to the intelligence community and are what you might call insiders and whistleblowers today. And there is an extraordinary correlation between all of that. These ancient cultures, of course, call this common thread, shall we say, different names. Some, like the Gnostic people, call them Archons. The Zulus call them Chitahuri. The Islamic belief system calls them jinn. Mm-hmm. So it goes on. But what you're looking at is the description of a non-human force, which ultimately is not in form, though it does take. That is an inverted distortion expression of consciousness. And if you're looking for a word in the human language that would describe it, though it hardly does, but it's the closest we can get, this consciousness is psychopathic. Another way of describing it is demonic from a more religious perspective. And this consciousness has sought to infiltrate human society, pull human consciousness into itself, so human consciousness becomes an outward expression of it. And this has moved on, and we've seen more and more evidence through the ages of this empathy-deleted, psychopathic, demonic consciousness, which is manifested in endless world events, local and global, which have been expressions of that. I mean, a simple thing. Bombing the innocent from the sky in Libya while claiming to be protecting them from violence, that is an expression of this psychopathic consciousness in control of that situation, allowing unbelievable numbers of people through the decades and centuries to die of hunger in a world of plenty, to have the empires that were driven by this, these incarnations of this consciousness, known as the British Empire. Now we have the American Empire, though they don't give it that name, and all these other empires, imposing their will upon other ancient and societies and cultures, and all that they've done. Pedophilia, Satanism, the sacrifice of children. This is all coming out of this psychopathic, I'll call it archontic consciousness as one name for it, which has no capacity for empathy. And one of the things that has people reel back and say this can't be happening, like sacrificing children, torturing children, sexually abusing children, and all the death and destruction that you see from the military, particularly the US and British military. People say they would never do that. No one could do that. And I say to them, no, you could not do that. But this consciousness, which expresses itself through these various military and political and corporate and all the rest of it, groups, they don't have empathy. And if you don't have empathy and there are no emotional consequences for your actions because you don't feel any consequences emotionally no matter what you do, the whole fail-safe mechanism of human behavior is gone. It's deleted. It's not there. So we cannot, in my experience of researching this for 30 years, we cannot really overplay or exaggerate the scale of what people call evil that this consciousness is capable of. And here's the key. Up to this point, this consciousness, which of course plays out in a particular band of frequency, which reflects its state of being, a very low band of frequency, it has been seeking to pull humanity in general into that frequency with their perceptual, emotional, and mental states. Because once you pull human consciousness into that frequency can merge with human consciousness and take it over. It's an ancient theme of possession. So the idea has been to structure human society and manifest events that pull humanity into states of fear, states of anxiety, states of depression, states of hatred, states of unprocessed anger, because anger in its form of wanting to make a difference can be processed into something positive. And the more that you can pull people into these low vibrational emotional states, you're pulling them into the vibrational stadium of this archontic, psychopathic, demonic awareness or consciousness. And that's what's happened. Now, the end game that I mentioned about AI is to connect technologically the human brain, the human mind, the human thought and emotional processes to artificial intelligence. So instead of manipulating human perception, as has happened up to now, the artificial intelligence becomes human perception and does its thinking and emotional responses from that AI perspective, deleting what we now call human consciousness. And I hear, as I say in the book, I hear people all the time, of course, AI this, AI that, AI the other. I don't hear this question. What is AI? What is it? See, there's two types of AI. There's one that I call algorithmic AI, encoding AI. And there's the other one, which some people within the business call strong AI. I will call it learning AI, a state of awareness AI, which I say is an expression of this psychopathic, archontic distortion. And what they're doing is manipulating humanity to be technologically connected to that demonic, archontic AI, so that that becomes every human thought, every human perception, every human emotion. That's where we are going so fast. And of course, the more they can pull people into cul-de-sacs of irrelevant focuses of the mind, with political correctness, or you can't say this and you can't say that, or well, what about Trump? Oh, I like Trump. Oh, I hate Trump. I'm going to stop Trump. I'm supporting Trump. And all while this is going on, a few people in Silicon Valley are dictating human society. People are looking over there because they've got caught in the perceptual trap of the here today, gone tomorrow vaudeville stage show we call politics.
So true. And there's, going back in your own work, at the one book you had many years ago called Love is All There Is, Everything Else is Illusion. We need to get into the nature of what these beings are not, because we live in this area of a realm between realms of very, very high frequency, and then these lower realms reaching into it, the archontic realm reaching into this. And we're the game in between. And one of the things I've been doing recently is I've been out on the speaking circuit talking about this, or the origin story from a slightly separate point of view, which I think I shared with you years ago, having to do with us being a kind of hybrid species of this animal complex of Earth and this other dimensional being that's highly creative, highly intelligent, has compassion, understands beauty and love. So when you're talking about this archontic realm in your book, you're saying the one thing these beings cannot generate, they can't generate creativity. They don't have any. They can't generate love. They don't have any. Let's talk about why they're trying to do these very things to the human species, because people will say, why are they doing it? Why humans? We're a unique and beautiful species at our core, and they need what we have. We don't need what they have.
Well, what I do in the book, I look at the writings of this people. It's not a race, it's a belief system known as Gnostics. They were way ahead of their time in many ways. They were the people that ran the Great or Royal Library of Alexandria, which was way ahead of its time, and was destroyed by the Roman Church, of course, because it was way ahead of its time. And they describe in these writings, because whenever this Gnostic belief system got a platform anywhere to communicate its ideas and its beliefs, like the Royal Library of Alexandria, like the Cathars in southern France, which were Gnostics, then the Roman Catholic Church sent the boys in, the equivalent of sending in the American military or the British military today, and destroyed them. And it seemed that at the siege of Montigny Castle in southern France in 44, that was the end of the Gnostics, and we didn't really know what they believed. But then in 1945, a jar was found, an earthen jar was found at a place called Nagamadi, about 75, 80 miles north of Luxor on the Nile in Egypt. And what was inside was an absolute treasure trove of Gnostic writings, which is, it's estimated were probably put in that jar and hidden away around 400 AD, which kind of syncs with the destruction of the Royal Library at Alexandria in Egypt. And what they describe is a force which ultimately is something that doesn't take form. It's consciousness, as I would call it, has been manipulating human society and human perception, and has created a fake reality. They said that this fake reality was the reality that we experience as the world, and that the real reality was beyond it. And what I do in the chapter afterwards, when I explain all this and quote from the texts, is compare what they were saying with the fact, as I've been saying now for, again, decades, and now more and more mainstream scientists are coming out and saying the same, including a guy called Rich Terrell at NASA, that we live in the equivalent of a vastly advanced virtual reality video game. Interestingly, the physics of our reality and the physics of video games are basically the same. And when you compare the modern computer view of being in a simulation and what the Gnostics were describing in their own language of the time, you are, I suggest, looking at the same thing. And they said, basically, that this archontic force had created this artificial reality, this simulated reality, to entrap the human mind in a prison, and had basically made the human body a prison. And going back to what you said earlier about, we are something greater than we appear to be. The human body, the human mind, the human brain, a better way of describing it, is a processor of information. It ain't bothered what the information is, it will just process it. what you let in as information, it will process. So if you go way out there and you get massive insights, well, through the heart too, but through the mind, through the brain, you will process that information and it will manifest here as thought and insight and understanding. But I call the human body, and I have done for decades again, a biological computer. It's a processor of information. It's a receiver, transmitter of information. Now, if I want to control what goes on this computer screen in front of me, I have to encode the decoding processes of the computer to decode some information, which is what I want on the screen, but not decode other information that I don't want on the screen. This is the same principle as the Chinese internet, where so much of the internet is denied the Chinese because it's firewalled off. What this consciousness manifesting through particular bloodlines and non-human form as well, like reptilians, greys, whatever, out there beyond human sight most of the time, have done, is systematically program and encode the human brain to only process certain frequencies of information. And thus, if that's all you do, and that encoding is basically the five senses. The information the five senses process is basically what most people consciously live their lives with in terms of a perception of self and reality. The idea is to hold people in that five sense reality. So the greater self, the expanded self, not some alien in a spaceship, an expansion of our own consciousness, does not impact upon the perceptions of the conscious mind. And when you do that, you are isolating the possibility of perception to what the brain will decode. And we hear phrases that absolutely sum it up. We hear people say, look, mate, I can't get my head around that. No, you can't process that information. That's why so many people still, though it's getting smaller, still think I'm a lunatic and crazy and insane because they literally can't process the information I'm talking about. But the brain will process information that you allow into its processing and decoding processes. And therefore, if you reject the program, which is a perceptual program, which runs from cradle to grave, which I call the postage stamp consensus in the book, where you come out of the womb and your parents who've been through the process you're about to go through are impacting what they've downloaded as the program, the postage stamp consensus of possibility and reality. They're now immediately passing it on to you as the youngest child just out of the womb. You then go to what we call school and university and college, and your whole formative years are sitting at a desk or whatever, a lecture room, having this postage stamp consensus given to you as reality. They're telling you what is right, what is wrong, what is possible, what's impossible, what's sane, what's insane, all of it. And you go through your entire formative years downloading this program. You then go out into the institutions as a journalist, as a doctor, as a scientist, as a politician, as somebody in the corporate world, and you take with you, all of you, this download of postage stamp normal, which is a narrow band of perception of the possible. You're now in the perceptual prison. You're basically operating in five sense reality and the five sense frequency band. These institutions then confirm to each other that their postage stamp normal is how things are. Journalists don't write articles about reality and come to people like me. They don't write articles about health and go to a complementary alternative practitioner who may have had amazing success with this particular subject they're talking about. They will go to a scientist who will give them the song sheet version of reality, which is a nonsense, provably so. And they will go to a doctor who will give them the song sheet version of that particular health subject. And then all the time, as you're going through this sausage machine, this programming machine from birth, from womb to cemetery, basically, you're having 24/7 now, the mainstream media are bombarding you with confirmation of this postage stamp consensus of possibility, because that's the point of that the mainstream media comes from, and I have to say the vast majority of the alternative media, yes, in terms of possibility and the world. Then you have peer pressure. All the people around you who've been through this programming operation and bought it, then jump on you if you have the audacity to question it. You look at politics. Oh, politics, we've got choice. Yeah. Do you want someone slightly on the left of the postage stamp or slightly on the right of the postage stamp or someone in the middle of the postage stamp? That's politics. Science is on the postage stamp. Medicine's on the postage stamp. The media's on the postage stamp. And when you step off it and say, up yours, darling, I'm out of here, you realize the extraordinary amount of information that lies in wait for you once you are in a position where you reject the intimidation to conform to the postage stamp. And then you go, whoa, so that's what's happening. And so the whole idea is to focus perception within a frequency band, and this postage stamp consensus is that focus of perception. I can't, it's not possible. The world is solid. I'm just, I'm just born 70 years and 10, and then I disappear into nothingness. I mean, all this stuff. Or some God is dictating, and you must do what this man in a frock says because he knows what God wants you to do, and all that stuff. It's all part of the postage stamp programming. And what is happening now, what people call awakening, is that people are stepping off the postage stamp. And they're saying, okay, this is what I've been told is reality. Let's see if it stands up. And you're only a few steps off the postage stamp before you say, what a load of crap that we've been believing up to this point. It's a hoax. It's all a hoax. Politics is a hoax. Science is a hoax. Medicine is a hoax. Journalism is a hoax. It's all a hoax. And this is the awakening. People are awakening not to something new, but awakening to who they've always been. But this hoax has shielded them from remembering and from understanding. And that's what the awakening is.
And yet there's an even more corrupt aspect of this that's been going on for a very long time. And you've been speaking about it for many years. And it's something that I've been kind of reticent myself to really jump into. But because it's coming from all angles right now, I mean from every angle, I thought, no, we need to talk about it. And we need to talk about the fuel that is being given into these forces by way of incest and pedophilia. And this is the part of the conversation a lot of people are just not comfortable with. As you know, even from the people that follow your work, it's a very, very difficult one. Because something sacrosanct, which is a child's innocence, is being stolen by these very forces, and it's absolutely ubiquitous. In fact, I have to read something to you. This is from the Atlantic magazine. It basically said, It's an article from the Atlantic that dove right into it and the effects of just incest alone on society, and said that the United States would come to, and this would have to be Britain and most countries, would come to an absolute grinding halt if all the people that were participating in incest were, the whistle was blown, they were indicted, they had to go through the court system, they had to go into jail and so forth. The entire structure of society would absolutely collapse.
The entire structure of the establishment would.
It would, and society.
As I've shown in the books many, many times, these elite bloodlines that basically run the world as an expression of this archontic consciousness, this demonic consciousness. Incest is absolutely not, here and there. It's a fundamental foundation of it. So when you're looking at these people in power from these bloodlines, people like the Bush family, they've all, it's incest is the foundation of it. I've quoted people who've interacted with the Rothschilds and what have you, and know that this is the case. And the other thing is, of course, is why? When I was in America back in the 90s, and I came across the scale of mind control, first of all, but also the scale of pedophilia and child abuse. Obviously, there's a question. Why is it happening? Why are these elite bloodlines particularly obsessed with incest, obsessed with child abuse, and sex with children, and all that goes with it? And then as the years have passed and I've understood more and glean more information, it's clear that, well, again, it's a simple thing of frequency. One of the things the Gnostics talk about is that the archontic distortion feeds off human emotion. Now, this, if we bring it forward to the area of physics, makes absolutely perfect sense. Because if you have a radio and you tune it to radio 1, you get radio 1 because you're on its frequency. You're not getting radio 2, you're not getting radio 3. They're on different frequencies. So this archontic distortion operates because of its nature, its perceptual nature, within a certain band of frequency, a very low band of frequency. And if you are feeding energetically off others because you don't have your own energetic source of sustenance, because you are not connected in the same way to the wider consciousness we call awareness, you have to feed off energy produced within the frequency band that you operate. And thus, this awareness feeds off fear, anxiety, depression, hatred, conflict, resentment, all these low vibrational emotions, which it has structured society to produce. Imagine what a world war produces, or what is happening in Syria and Libya and Iraq produces in terms of that low vibrational frequency. Enormous amounts of it. And it feeds off it. And one of the things it's very clear, not just from this Gnostic source, but from other sources in other cultures around the world, is that one particular energy that this distortion wants more than any other is the prepubescent energy of children. We look at puberty and we see it as a hormonal change, but the base form of the body, as the base form of this whole entire reality, is not what we see. That is a decoded projection of it. It's a holographic decoded projection of it. The base form is waveform information. So for instance, what does a computer do in a Wi-Fi situation? It takes information in waveform Wi-Fi form and it decodes it through its systems, and it puts it on the screen in a totally different form to what its base form is, which is Wi-Fi information fields. That is mirroring the way that we decode reality. So when we are decoding that information in what I call the cosmic Wi-Fi field, we are decoding it onto our screen in the brain into the reality we think is outside of us and solid, when actually it's a holographic illusion of solid. So when children go through puberty, we perceive it within the projection, the holographic projection, as a hormonal change, but the hormonal change is merely a holographic expression of a vibrational frequency change that is going on at the waveform field, in the waveform field of the body. This force wants that energy before that change takes place. And this is why we've had this obsession with the abuse and the sacrifice of children going way back. The ancients used to sacrifice young virgins to the gods. What was young virgins code for? Children. So what we're looking at is something that's always been, but we're now seeing it in a different form, in a different era of human development, if you like. But it's always gone on. And so people have no problem accepting that the ancients sacrificed people and children to the gods. Well, who were the gods? This force were the gods in various expressions. And they have no problem in accepting that all that happened. What I'm saying is that although there came a point in human development where, in general, people rejected that, it didn't disappear. It went underground. So instead of it being done in the open as before, we're having a ritual, everybody here doing a ritual sacrifice to the gods. Now it happens in satanic rituals in the unseen. And so it's the same thing is going on. And what is happening, for instance, when a child is being sacrificed or an adult is being sacrificed, is there is a ritual which has been going on for centuries. And they just repeat it. They use the same rituals now that the Druids did and the Babylonians did. And they are building up, on one level, a absolute terror within the victim, understandably so. And at the point of sacrifice, as the terror reaches its climax in this build-up, particular adrenaline enters the body, and that is a nectar to the Satanists in our reality. That's when they drink the blood of the sacrifice. But what's released into the ether, where these entities and expressions of this distortion operate beyond the narrow band of frequency that we can see, is that the terror of the sacrifice is released, and they feed off that. And hence you have the reason for the term sacrifice to the gods. And it's happening now. I came to America in the 1990s, about 1996, and the synchronicity of my life, which has been extraordinary since my own awakening in 1990, took me on a synchronistic journey across America through, quote, coincidences that put so many people and situations into my experience, where I saw the scale of it. And of course, if you go deep enough, the American government is based on all this. The American military is based on all this. It's being run by these psychopathic, satanic, demonic entities. I mean, we've got a man running the American military called Mad Dog. Massive. I mean, giving it away or what? a look why they call him Mad Dog as well, and you might not sleep well thinking he's in charge of the American military.
It's true, David. I think even you've made a case for what has happened among the elite very successfully, and I think maybe what is even more disturbing to me is that has been inculcated into society at large. And I bring it up because back at the time you were noticing these trends, you might say, or this kind of overarching energy in America, was about the time that I first came into awareness of the subject of incest, for example, in that I found out my mother had been raped by her uncle. I found out my cousins had been raped by their brother. I found out girlfriends had been molested by uncles and fathers. And so we know the role that the Catholic Church has played, and in fact recently came into connection with a former Polish priest who was raped on his birthday at the time of his ordination as a priest. And he is blowing the whistle on from the inside of how this is endemic to the priesthood in general, what the priesthood is about in the Catholic Church, and from all of the research he's done. But the reality is, let me give you one more example. Zeus, my husband Zeus, teaches a psychology class, and in among his students, he has noticed at large that between 30 and 40% of his students have experienced incest. This is massive. This is been inculcated, this darkness has been inculcated into society, where children are forced to sit at the dinner table with someone who has caused sexual harm to them. The cognitive dissonance in that alone is astounding, because it's reached down this deeply. This is why I really decided I wanted to talk to you about this, because we have to call it out in our families, our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, or a twisted mother or aunt from time to time as well. So how has that happened?
Well, we're talking about a distortion, a distorted consciousness. And as I keep saying, this distortion is constantly seeking to impose itself and infiltrate itself and assimilate itself with human consciousness. And of course, what you're describing is an expression of an extraordinary state of perceptual distortion. I mean, people like me, I grew up in a working class home in Leicester. And what was going on behind other doors, when I look back, I have no idea. But from my perspective, none of this ever happened to me, or I never came across it. But once you, and this can be, if you're not open-minded, this can be a block. That if it's not happened to you, then it can't be happening. This is right. A very, very strange perceptual connection that people make. Didn't happen to me, can't be happening. What? Have you ever swum the channel? Some people, the English Channel, some people have. Just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. And when I got to America in about 1996 and started traveling, I was talking to nobody in terms of events. I was talking to people's front rooms and 8 people in a meeting near Chicago and all this stuff. But what I was doing was meeting an incredible number of people who were very, very knowledgeable in various areas about what was going on. And I came across this. And to me, it was extraordinary. It wasn't something you dismissed. You say, hold on a minute, one person's told you this. Well, that's interesting. 2 people tell you, 3 people tell you in different cities at different times. Different situations, different backgrounds, and then it crosses a line where you go, hey, this is happening and this is massive. And when you get into the so-called upper echelons of society, the cesspit levels of society that actually run it, like I say, it's a foundation. I was in long correspondence for a while with a man in America who was living under another name now, but the name that was his, if you like, birth name was Philip Eugene de Rothschild. He claimed to be, with good evidence, the unofficial son of one of the Rothschilds that started the wine business, the Mukon Cadet, do they call it, in France. And he said he grew up at the center where the wine is produced. And he told me in great detail what he experienced. And one of the things he said was that incest is just part of life. And that you are brought up, because what's been explained to me by people who've studied this for a long time, this particular area, physiologically, and go into things that people don't like, but then we're looking for the truth here. But when you have anal sex with a child, where does it basically take place? In the area of the root chakra, the root vortex of the chakra system of the body, which interpenetrates the body with the wider reality of energy and awareness. And what I've been told, not just by one person either, is that it creates such a shock that goes through the spinal cord, it goes up into the brain, and it does something to the brain. This is what they're looking to do. They understand it a lot more, obviously, because it's passed on through the generations. So there are many reasons why it's done. And it's almost an initiation in the elite level, an initiation into this whole conspiracy in so many ways. Of course, what that does to you psychologically is almost incomprehensible. And it scrambles you, and we come back to the word again, distorts you in terms of what you would be like and what your perceptions would be and how you would feel and how you see the world, how you see yourself, by comparison with if it didn't happen.
Right.
And so what they're doing, these elite families, is they are preparing their own children to serve the conspiracy in the next generation by preparing them perceptually and locking them in to this low vibrational frequency, because this is what I've understood now over many, many years. These entities that are expressions of this distorted consciousness, some take a reptilian form, some take the form of the Greys, some take demonic forms. They take many different forms, but the consciousness is the foundation. While these pedophiles, and these elite bloodline pedophiles particularly, but pedophiles in general, are possessed by this distortion, by this archontic distortion. If you weren't, you couldn't be in such a empathy deleted state that you would do that to children. I mean, it's cause and effect here. And while the pedophile is sexually abusing the child, the possessing consciousness or the possessing entity is feeding off and drawing off the child's energy. It's energetic vampiring that we're looking at, with the pedophile as the conduit for this to happen, the possessed pedophile. And you then listen to shamans talking about their ancient cultures and how those that see beyond what we call the physical into the wider energetic field see the results in children going way back. This is not a new thing, like I keep saying.
No.
The energetic consequences in their field of that energy being drawn off by these entities. And when in the Matrix movies, the Morpheus character held up a battery and said, the machines have turned human beings into one of these, a battery, that was symbolically exactly what is going on. They're feeding off us. This is why they don't want us loving each other. They don't want us loving ourselves. They don't want us in harmony with each other. They don't want us in heart connection with each other. They don't want open hearts, because that takes you onto a higher vibrational state of energy, of frequency.
Out of their bandwidth, right?
They can't access that.
Right, out of their bandwidth.
So, you know, when I see people in the alternative media, well, I think most of it's not alternative at all. It's just a different part of the postage stamp that realize there is a bit of a conspiracy going on. And they're talking about stockpiling weapons and fighting the enemy. Well, what does this archontic force say to that? Lunch. If you talk about the need to love each other and be in harmony with each other, oh, yeah, that's weak, that's weak, that's not manly. No, well, it might not be manly to you, mate, but it's the only way out of here. Because your version of being manly, we're going to fight and all this, the rest of it, that's how we got into this place. And what people have got caught in is this vortex going round and round and round the garden, meeting yourself back at where you started, round and round and round. This closed feedback system whereby you fight the enemy with hatred and with conflict and all these low vibrational emotions, and you feed the quote enemy and empower it to feed back that energy back at you. Breaking that cycle by breaking that emotional state is the way out of here, and that's what they're terrified of. That's why they don't want harmony. And whenever harmony starts to break out anywhere, they're in.
True.
Not through the American military and the British military on one level, breaking that harmony and causing conflict and the distortion to manifest. For instance, I've just watched today, funnily enough, a documentary. It's called Defamation, and it's by a Jewish guy who did this documentary. Basically, very, very good, very calm, and he just followed it, did a fly on the wall. And it is extraordinary how Jewish young people, particularly in Israel, are programmed from birth to believe that everyone else that isn't Jewish hates them. But it's not true. But when you've gone through that in all your formative years and all the information you're receiving is telling you that, then you believe it. And that distorts your perception of the rest of the world. And you will have the Muslim world, the extreme part of the Muslim world, being told that they have to do this because they're different and they're better than these people and all the rest of it. That's not the Muslim world in general, but it's just the extreme end of it. And they have to impose their will upon it. That's the program, which brings about disharmony and conflict. So if you look at the way children are brought up in different cultures, disharmony is programmed in from the earliest age. Instead of having the maturity to say, hey, we are all a point of attention within the same infinite state of awareness. That point of attention can be expansive into infinity, or it can be the size of a pea. That state or expansion or lack of expansion of awareness is down to your perceptual state, because your perceptual state dictates the area of this infinite awareness that you will focus upon. It can be an expanded focus, or it can be a very, very focused perception of reality where you see yourselves in very, very limited terms, basically founded on the 5 sense me, which is not who we are. It's just an experience. And therefore, when you get pulled into these what I call phantom self states, where you're self-identifying because of the tiny area of focus that you have of possibility, these different focus points of focus, which we call Muslims, Jewish people, white people, Chinese people, we call black, white, whatever, they can be played off against each other to divide and rule. Instead of saying, look, we are all one consciousness, having different experiences. We're all points of attention within this infinite awareness. And what you call yourself, your phantom self, I am a Muslim, I am a Jew, I am a Hindu, I am black, I am white, I am Asian. That's not who you are. That is what your point of attention is experiencing. Now, why can't we say, look, we're all having different experiences. Our point of attention within this short space of experience within this reality is seeing things slightly differently from a different angle. But why can't we respect each other's right to be different without feeling the need to impose our will, our point of focus on everyone else? Then we can be different because, of course, being different, expressing uniqueness, is to express the infinity of possibility without being in conflict. It's this manipulated perception that somehow what someone believes has to be imposed upon everyone else. So a country has to be Christianized. It has to be Islamized, Hinduized, or whatever. Why can't we just get on and say, hey, look, you see life from a different angle to me. That's fair enough. Let's have a beer. And if you don't drink, well, let's have a cup of tea. Let's do whatever, but let's just have a chat and respect each other's right to be different. But if that happened, of course, what you then have is harmony. What you then have is harmonic communication. Literally harmonic communication in its effect on the energetic field. Distortion don't want that. It wants all these groups and all these perceptual, I would call them programs, played off against each other. That's why we have religious wars, race wars, and all the other conflicts. And in the end, it's all coming from this distortion that is manipulating events. But we have the power. The distortion has to pull itself, or pull us into it for it to have that power. We can choose not to be pulled into that distortion. And in doing so, we have power over our reality and not something else. And that's its worst nightmare.
Indeed. And people are starting to resonate with this message now in much more massive numbers than when you started with 3 people in a living room. And I mentioned earlier at the start of the conversation, you'll land in certain countries where mainstream media will even come out to greet you and talk about your events that are upcoming. So I would like to know from you, as the person who is probably certainly the most well-known on the planet in terms of this whole notion of conspiracy and alternate thinking, what you're seeing in the world at large, because you're traveling the world, you're talking to people all over the world. What are you seeing by way of awakening?
Oh, I'm seeing an incredible difference. I started a world speaking tour, which up to just before Christmas took the form of 10-hour all-day events, and now is taking the form of 4-hour evening events, which is aimed to bring more people in who are curious to look at what the information says, because they're more likely to come to a 4-hour evening event if they're only curious than they are to 10 hours. And the 10-hour event is on my website and can be seen anyway. But I started in Britain in 2016, the summer of 2016. I went to right across Australia and New Zealand, about 6 events there. I did 3 in the United States. I went all the way across Europe. I went to Sweden. I went all the way up through the Balkans, where the mainstream media were very, very keen. I mean, I was on mainstream programs in the Balkans that anyone else would be on. Prime time. I mean, you imagine anywhere else being asked onto a breakfast program on the main channel and being given half an hour to talk about what you want, what you're saying. It's unbelievable. And what I'm seeing, and I can see this by the number of times I'm stopped in the street all over the world, that this information is getting out there. People are starting to think differently. I was told when I started out on this journey in 1990 that this was going to happen. It didn't seem like it was going to for a long time, but it is. I mean, when I was coming down from San Francisco to Los Angeles to fly out last time I was in America, I stopped overnight with my son Jamie at a place I love called Morro Bay. A little seaside fishing place, beautiful, love it. And I went into a restaurant. We only stayed one night. The waitress read my books. I went across and we went to a bar and there was a band playing. In the middle of the band playing, the band stopped and the lead singer said, "You're not who I think you are you?" Who read my books? And I went to the Isle of Man, which is a small island, last weekend, my 2 sons for a little break before this year takes off. And we were in this sports bar watching a football match. Not many people there. 2 people came up to me who were into my stuff. And this is happening everywhere. I stopped on the street in Australia by a guy in a business suit with a briefcase. And you see it when I even go around where I live. People who years ago used to laugh at me in the street, snigger behind their hand, are now coming up asking about what's going on in the world. It's really the numbers and the frequency are getting to the point where not only is the number of people that are looking at this increasing dramatically, but the kind of people you would never have thought would have ever turned their minds to this. And ironically, the more these, I think, deeply sick and disturbed people in Silicon Valley and those that control them are seeking to suppress this, the more people are saying, well, hold on a minute, so what are they saying then? And so it's almost counterproductive in a way. And when we have challenges, you know, as we do, as they try to shut us down, you just have to turn around and run straight at them. And if a door closes, well, find another door to open then. Don't sit there moaning, oh, look, I'm a victim. You know, I'm a martyr. I don't want to be a martyr. And I refuse to be a victim. We have to get on with it because we have the power. This is what this distortion wants. It wants us to believe we don't have the power because then we sit on our hands and do nothing. Well, where's that going to take us? Nowhere. So you keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And the door's open because there is another force at work which operates obviously, because of its very nature, it operates in a much higher frequency. And people say, when's the cavalry coming? And, well, if the cavalry came, symbolically, and manifested in the frequency band that most people are in, it wouldn't be the cavalry for long. It will be on its smartphone, right? Watching CNN. So we have to expand our awareness to connect with it. And then it can start to influence not just our insights, but influence our experience. Because in the end, whether it's a higher frequency or a low frequency, it's still an expression of this same one consciousness. And thus, it's an expression of us. And as I've said, I've just been putting this this evening talk together, and I'm going to put this image on the screen, and it's a guy looking in the mirror, and he's saying, "Oh, so it was down to me all along." Yes, it was. It is. It's all down to us. And once you externalize responsibility, once you externalize power, what are you going to do about it? Instead, what I'm going to do about it, you're externalizing your power, you're giving it away to the very force that is making the world in a state that you'd like to change. Because when you give your power away, and you do that by not taking responsibility, some other force says, "Oh, thanks for that. I'll have that. I'll have that. I'll have that," and then I'm going to roll it back against you. Responsibility is the first stage of sorting this out, and people have to realize that, because they still, in large numbers, even those that are awakening, they would still rather someone else did it for them. That's
no time for that.
How we got into this mess. Not how we're going to get out.
I agree. The time for that is over. We have to stand up. We have to do our own 360 or vertical integration with that lovely higher energy that exists within us and exists even beyond us. But that's our choice, that we have to do that. And I was laughing when you were talking about all these people coming up. And if you don't mind my being just a wee bit personal before we sign off here, I remember that happening here in Penryn one day when you were a guest here at our house years ago, and you went out for a little walk in the country in this kind of redneck area. And you said, "Hey, mate, I'm kind of lost. I don't know how you get back. You're out in a bird preserve." And the man came up to you and said, "Oh my God, are you who I think you are? Out in the middle of nowhere, out in a field. Are you David Icke?"
Yeah, and you know, I use that as a barometer.
Yeah.
Not because, "Oh yes, I'm David Icke," but as a barometer. Because 30 years ago, I couldn't walk down almost any street, certainly in Britain, without being laughed at and ridiculed. It was historic levels of ridicule. So that was my barometer then, but my barometer now is dramatically changed. And I went through a period where people didn't ridicule me so much, but they didn't take any interest either. But now we're into a stage where the barometer is saying, "Hey, something's happening here. There's a change taking place." And I think it's very, very important. One of the things that I would call much of it so-called alternative media has done is focus on the fact that there's a problem. Now, that is important, because unless you realize there's a problem, unless you realize the world is not like you thought it was, then nothing's going to be done about the fact that it's not like you thought it was and there is a problem. But if you only stay in the 5 sense level of this, with names, dates, places, and what have you, which I do enormous amounts about, because we need to know that. But if you stay there only, then what is left to find answers than to stockpile weapons to fight the enemy, or to support another hoax called Donald Trump in the desperate belief that he's different to all the other stooges that went before? He ain't. That's all that's left. Because if you stay in the 5 sense level of the problem, you can only seek out and perceive 5 sense answers to the problem.
Yeah.
And the 5 sense problem is manifesting in the world of the 5 senses, but it ain't coming from there. And B, therefore, if you're going to solve the problem or remove the cause of it, which is a better way of doing it, then you have to do it at the level it's coming from, not at the level it's manifesting. It's like trying to change a movie by shouting at the screen. It ain't going to change. You've got to change where the movie is being projected from. And that's in the area of consciousness and awareness, a distortion or a harmony. That's the choice. We have a world of distortion because it's being manipulated by a consciousness that's distorted. We will have a world of harmony when the dominating frequency, the dominating energetic state is one of harmony. If we're in a room together, a group of people, and we're all getting on and respecting each other, then that energetic field in that room is harmonious, and people feel it. They feel joy, they feel happiness, they feel good about being in that energy and interacting with those people. You put the same people in another room, in another perceptual state, and they're all arguing and cussing with each other and condemning each other, then that is a massively distorted state, and people feel it. Oh, the atmosphere in this room, you could cut it with a knife. Why could you cut it with a knife? Because it's so heavy, because that's the frequency that's manifested by that state of being. And do we want to live in that room or that room, that world or that world? That's the choice, and we are responsible for which one it is.
Hear, hear. I know your dinner bell is ringing. I've been watching the time. I think your dinner's right about up now.
I know. I put my food in the oven.
Thanks for running it right up to the time of the bell.
An hour and a half, which I thought it would run. So I'm not quite got the smell of burn yet, but it might not be far off.
I think so. I'm watching your timer right here. David, I want to thank you so much. I'm just so happy for you that you have hung in there all these years until the tide has finally started turning. Your own life is just going gloriously. They're making a movie about your life, I understand. You have your new book out, Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, so people can kind of look into the entire story of what we've been talking about and 1,000 times more. Any final statement before we sign off?
Yeah, also, that 10-hour all-day talk that I've been doing around the world, that's available at davidicke.com. As well in 4 sections. Well, I look at the world now, and there are many challenges because this manipulation is desperate to shut down the ability to communicate. There are groups in Britain who are trying to every time to stop me speaking in public. It's unbelievable that it's allowed, but it is. But I'm working. And every time they get a venue to cancel through absolute lies, which the venue, of course, never checks out, we find another one, and we carry on. And so there are challenges. But when I look back 30 years, when I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at, when I look back, 10 years, 12 years, when people just weren't really interested in any number. And then I look at now, then something is happening. And I was told, I met a lot of psychics in the early days when I was first awakening. I first had my, massive awakening in 1990, 91. And there was a common theme among them that they were saying, we're being told to tell you that there's a vibrational change coming, and it's going to wake humanity up from its coma, and all that's been hidden is going to be brought to the surface where it can be seen. Well, of course, in 1990, there was no evidence of that whatsoever. But I look now, and it's happening. And the first book I wrote, which came out in 1991, which I wrote in a daze because I didn't know what the hell was happening to me, I called it Truth Vibrations because that's the name I gave to this energetic vibration of awakening frequency. And when you look at it now, look at all that's been brought to the surface that was hidden before, that we know now, that we didn't know in 1990, we didn't know 5 years ago. And look at all the people that are awakening, because what I was told was that this frequency change, this truth vibration, would affect those that were more awake first, but eventually would awaken those that at that time were solid gold asleep. It's happening. It's happening. Not in the numbers we would like, but in numbers that are shocking. compared with what it used to be like. And I've been doing this for 30 years, so I've been a bit of a barometer myself of this awakening and how it's changed. And never even close to what's happening now. And so there's a lot to be encouraged about. And as for not giving up, well, never. Because when you give up, I mean, what does that mean? You're accepting what is. I don't accept what is. I never will. Therefore, to the moment I leave this reality, I'll be doing what I do.
And on behalf of myself and everybody watching this and the millions of others who've been exposed to you, I truly thank you for being the warrior that you are and for never giving up. David, thank you so much.
Really nice to talk to you again after all this time, Regina.
I know. I hope to see you before too terribly long over in England. So go well.
I'm going to come to America next year and do a lot.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, definitely catch you then for sure. So meanwhile, have a lovely dinner. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your lifetime of work, David.
Thank you. I'm cooking it. It can't possibly be a lovely dinner, but I'll get by.
Okay.
See you. Bye.
Bye. And for more on David Icke, you can go to davidicke.com. Again, pick up a copy of his new book. And in the interim, I just want to thank you for joining us here on reginameredith.com. Until next time, thank you.